Oh,
We can
perfect.
go ahead, Brigitte, if you want to go ahead and read. And if you want to
Yes,
introduce
sorry
yourself
to.
as well
Yeah,
to their WFNB March open mic.
absolutely. Thank you, Rhonda, for hosting. My name is Brigitte Rivers. Confuses everybody because it's spelt Brigitte, but pronounced somewhat differently. And I originally come from the UK. I've been living in New Brunswick for 17 years this month. I've taught teenagers who were not born when I moved to New Brunswick, which is kind of scary in a way. So Rhonda had introduced a theme for this, suggested theme for this month of, I think it was emergence, wasn't it, Rhonda? And so I'm kind of speaking to that. Last month I found it really inspiring. I loved all of the pieces that people shared and the different takes on the theme and how we're handling COVID and kind of managing and dealing with stuff and processing what we're experiencing. And one of the things that I do is I write a column for the Bugle Observer newspaper, which sometimes makes its way into other Brunswick news publications. And so I went away and wrote a poem, which I then put in my column that went out not November. I'll say that again, Chris, from the top. I put out a column in mid-February, including the poem that I'd written, inspired by, or I guess it was inspired by last month's theme and the contributions that we heard. So I'll just read it, and then I have one more piece to read after that, which I think will speak to the emergence piece, hopefully. So bear in mind, this was written early February. Snow by Brigitte Rivers. Here we are in the depths of winter. True to the forecast, we've already seen a lot more snow than last year. The 3-plough storm we just had, as I write this, dumped such a large drift in my yard, I couldn't hang out my towels to dry on my washing line in today's relatively sunny -16 degrees Celsius. Undaunted, I draped them over my deck railings instead. Defying Facebook friends' expectations and mine, they partially dried instead of freezing solid. It's the little things, right? Winter, like so many challenges in life, can sometimes benefit from a shift in perspective. And I say that because my column is entitled Keeping It in Perspective. I decided a long time ago the best way to embrace its inevitable white coatings is by stepping into my snowshoes whenever I can. Amazingly, the same pair I picked up at LL Bean back then, amazingly, the same pair I picked up at LL Bean back when that was much easier to do is still going strong. The benefits to mental and physical health of getting out in nature any time of year are immense, especially when we can during the shorter, colder days. Add appropriate layers, physical activity that boosts circulation and endorphins, and throw in a pop of vitamin D, and we have a winning recipe for immunity-boosting wellness. I know it helps keep me sane and smiling. I wrote this poem after arriving home today from a delightful hike. Snow and I. Winter sun shines, beckons, coy, peeking out from behind shifting veils of cirrocumulus. Newly fallen flakes sparkle all around, heaped up here and there by storm and shovel and plough. Time to quit pacing tiger's cage, escape to wind-sculpted white. Blue breaks through pale wisps above a monochrome world. Rough, furrowed, naked earth made beautiful by plush, forgiving blanket. Sounds hushed, but for unseen birds' commentary, soft, rhythmic sinking of snowshoes, faint backdrop of infernal food production, breeze too light to carry identifying odor. Each step a firm planting, toes spread, legs strong, torso warm, fingers tingle, glow inside gloves, inside mittens. Face welcomes cool sunlight. Senses feast on familiar landscape, simplified by snow. While I'll start that again. While it's also been a colder winter than the last one, I'm grateful for less of the seesawing temperatures that lead to slick surfaces, slips and falls. Here's hoping the groundhogs got it wrong and we're headed for an early spring. If they were right, then fingers crossed Old Man Winter goes out gently. So that's the column with an embedded poem in it. I can take liberties with my column. So I'm just going to say before I read the second piece that while people are speaking, I know this from experience having recorded sessions, we all need to have our microphone muted, please. Those of you who have not done so yet, please. It's just going to make Chris's job easier. So the second piece was, it's actually, I'm not really sure what to call it. It's somehow a combination of, or I'm not really sure, perhaps you can be the judges of that. It's an affirmation, maybe a poem. I wrote it last year in July 21st, in the 21st year. And you may be able to tell from this that I'm a yoga teacher. It might show through. Trees and water, sky and earth, you call to me, and my spirit is stirred, reaches out, rises, rejoices, embracing all that is sacred. Heart overflows with gratitude for all the ways you sustain us. There.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Brigitte. Sarah, you found your way in. I see you. I'm sorry. I made a mistake with the Zoom link. When I created this event, I created an event, but somehow I managed to mix them up. Anyway, so I sent a new email out. Yeah, I sent a new email out to everyone, but
it didn't come in for some reason because all I had was the one from yesterday. So that one kept sending me over and it said this meeting was scheduled for the 2nd and 5th of February.
Right, yes.
So I didn't know who to correspond with to say, hey, it's telling me it's for the 5th of February. So
right.
for whatever reason, the other email isn't there, but I'm here. So great.
Great. Awesome.
Okay.
I always call her Jane. I go, Jane, help me.
How much did I miss? I hope I didn't miss too much.
Not too much. I'm just going to send a note here to Jerry.
You missed a nice little column reading. Is it the Bugle? It used to be called the Bugle when I lived in Carleton County. Has she gone? Is Brigitte gone? No?
She may have.
She may have left. Yeah, it was just the Bugle. Was it called?
Oh, okay. Well, I see her there.
Yeah.
Maybe she's stepped
right.
away. Yeah, she works. Yeah, she writes freelance for the paper that's there. So if it's the Bugle.
The names.
Yeah. Well, this is just a poor beginning, but anyways, we'll welcome. I wanted to, before we began, I wanted to plug the New Brunswick writing competition. We have extended the competition until March 18th. And when the competition began on December 1st, we announced the addition of an 8th category, which is the Jane LeBlanc Screenwriting Award. So there are 7 other categories to choose from: fiction, short fiction, poetry, manuscript, single poem, books for young people, that's by adults, but for young people, teen writers ages 13 to 18, and narrative nonfiction. So if anyone is interested in submitting before the 18th, you can visit the website wfnb.ca/writing-competition. Okay, so gosh, we had 10 readers, but not everybody is here. We'll go in alphabetical order, which is Laura Brown, who's not here yet.
Yes, I am.
You are?
Here.
Oh, great. Well, then you can begin, Laura. And Feel free to introduce yourself. We can't see you. We can only hear you.
Yes, I don't know why my picture was up and now it's not, so I
Oh.
don't know. Anyway, I'm Laura Brown from St. Andrews, and I've been writing poetry for quite a few years. I've self-published 3 books of poetry, so. The first poem I'm going to read is February. Dry seaweed skitters across a skim of ice. A flock of seagulls rises, wings writhing in a turbulent sky. The earth sleeps, roots and seeds cocooned, while time is measured in beautiful, thoughtful seasons. The second poem is entitled Hope. Sometimes hope sends tiny roots into the damp earth, green leaves upward to the warm orb of the sun. Sometimes hope grows full-bloomed in summer, fragrant with sunshine, succulent with rain. Sometimes hope shines through the fiery red and yellow flames of autumn. Sometimes hope sleeps under the hard crust of winter, slumbering through the cruel winds and bitter snows of circumstance. That's my 2 poems.
Mm. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. Feel free to make comments in the chat too about what you hear tonight. Jean Francis, are you here? She's not here. I feel so bad about making that mistake. Elizabeth Fry Romanian. Am I
Hi.
pronouncing your name right? Romanian?
Romanian.
Romanian.
That's fine though. So yeah, it's Elizabeth Fry Romanian. I'm from Fredericton. I've been writing for several years, but I just joined the Writers Guild in September or the fall. Anyway, I can't remember the month. I did read in December for the open mic, and I haven't really stuck to the theme. Well, I really haven't at all. I couldn't seem to get inspired about that, but I do have 3 poems I'd like to read. The first is called The Heart. You hand me a walnut box with a hollow of blue velvet. I slide away the lid. Inside, a pearl ivory heart, a bead bracelet, peach coral and white bone. The room fills with a veil of dust. Your face, driftwood carved by the ocean, your eyes, no longer seas of dolphins. I lift the heart into light. Its gold chain swings across your solitude. I return the heart to velvet, sit beside you. No, I will be leaving soon. Second one is called Exhibition, and it's definitely not taking place in the winter. This is more in the middle of the summer. Exhibition. Walking through the humid crowds, the oily smells are too strong, bare skins are too close. My mouth wants to reject the cotton candy caught like sawdust in my throat. Heat from the food stands and neon lights leaves my hands swollen. The skin tight and tough as the lives around me. The lights of the Ferris wheel push the night stars further and further into space, into darkness. The lights of the Ferris wheel illuminate our souls. Then our humanness flickers and flickers and then burns out. The last one, I am quite interested in writing about the actual process of writing and what happened, well, at least in poetry, what happens when you are trying to write a poem. So this is more about the process of writing itself. It's called a reduction. There is something at the back of what some call the mind, this or that piece of time, morning light before the meaning has been added in, the eclipse of a voice waiting to be reduced to something understood as truth, words tripping down to meet and sift this barren life into something as true as flesh. Thank you. I don't know whether I went over the time or not, but sorry if I did.
We're a small group here tonight, so everyone can take their time.
Thanks. It's great to have the opportunity
Yeah,
to share. Yeah.
it is great. Thank you very much. I think Roger, you're the next person. I always expect to hear the 007 theme whenever I say your name. I don't know why.
That's 006 and a half. I never made it the whole way. It was St. David's Day on the 1st of March, which was last Tuesday, and I'm going to read you some Welsh material. This is for Louise, if Louise is there. On being Welsh in a land ruled by the English. I am the all-seeing eyes at the tip of Worm's Head. I am the teeth of the rocks at Wassilly. I am the blackness in Pulthdy Pool when the sea swells, stuck the stranger in and out, sanding his bones. Song pulled taut from a dark Welsh lung. I am the memories of Scylla and beast mingled in a Gower cave. Tamer of aurochs, hunter of deer, caretaker of coracle, fisher of salmon on the Abertawe tide. I am the weaver of rhinoceros wool. I am the minority persecuted for my faith, for my language, for my sex, for the cold dark of my thoughts. I am the bard whose harp strung like a bow will sing your death with music of arrows from the wild Welsh woods. I am the barb that sticks in your throat from the dark worded ambush of my song. And since that's a little bit grim, I shall read you Teeth. Teeth. Lunchtime. I open a can of tomato soup and heat it on the stove. I slice the remains of yesterday's loaf of bread into 1-inch cubes and fry them in olive oil and garlic. Tomato soup with croutons. Then I put 2 slices of bread in the toaster. My father will only eat toast soaked in butter and layered with Marmite when he eats tomato soup. Lunch is ready, I call out. The black American Cocker Spaniel, bought by my mother in a moment of madness by telephone, unseen, camps in the kitchen. It nests at the far end of the table by the stove and defends its territory with warning growls and a snap of yellow.
Did we lose Roger?
I'm here. I'm here now.
Oh, hi, Jerry.
Hello
Roger
there.
was reading and he froze. He's still
Oh.
frozen.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm missing what he's reading too.
Unlike Roger to freeze during a reading. Roger, come back. Can you hear us?
Anyways,
Well-
we got the right link now. I didn't know what the heck was going on there, so we're good now.
Well, wait. I do
Yeah.
apologize, Jerry. I had copied the event from last month and thought that I had put a new Zoom link in that, but I apparently did not. So
We all make mistakes.
yes, I make lots of them.
Yeah, me too. Count on it.
Is Roger back yet? When he comes back, he can complete his reading.
Actually, he can go back to the beginning for my sake, just from selfish purposes.
Sure. Well,
because
we have.
I love what he does.
He's wonderful. Jerry, if you're ready to read, you can, because we had to skip over you because you weren't here yet.
Oh, okay. I would absolutely love to.
All right.
Um,
And introduce yourself first, please.
well, hard to say. I've never really published any writing, some academic stuff in the past, but I started writing some poetry a couple of years ago, just out of an absolute love for having moved to New Brunswick, an absolute love for this place. And it just, you get to start thinking about all sorts of things, and they come up. So these days as you can tell from the headgear, I'm extremely concerned and involved with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as I have family there, and we have been doing many things to try and do what we can from this end. Unfortunately, none of us is able to shoot Mr. Putin between the eyes, which would be my preferred option. But we are. I did have an op-ed published on Times and Transcript on their online version today. Perhaps some of you have seen that. Anyways, none of that has to do with poetry. I haven't had time to write any poetry related to that. So the first one, I love the theme of emergence. And so I tried to find some things that I have written that would fit into that. And the first one I've got here is a poem called Waiting. Hope is the interval between the angry waves that smash against the jagged shoreline, or the speck of time between the penultimate note and the resolution, absent when the tune is discordant. It is the dandelion, its ray florets announcing their presence through a crack in the asphalt, or punctuating the landscape fabric that was laid there to keep it in its place. But hope's foe offers easy terms, $1 down and $1 a day, easy credit, no barriers to entry and an endless inventory. While hope flickers tenuously in the distance, enveloped by the void and starving for oxygen. Sometimes the asphalt is thick, solid enough for the big trucks to use, gears grinding and air brakes hissing, but the cracks always still manage to appear, and the striving pregnant buds eventually find their way to the irrepressible light. So that is the first one. The second one I've got, don't let it fool you. It is called Aboiteaux. And for those of you who know a little bit about Acadian history, Aboiteaux were these structures that Acadians built to turn land that had been essentially rendered infertile by salt water, and they managed to set it up so that the fresh water would come in and fill it, while the salt water wouldn't be able to come back in and render it infertile again. And so this is about the Aboiteaux, but it's not about the Acadian experience. It's about my own experience. Aboiteaux. It is not for want of testament that puts pen to paper. The battles are long past, and the need for revenge or even understanding has long since been kept on the saltwater side of the Aboiteaux. The marsh's thirst is slaked only by fresh water now, its soil rich, nurturing seeds of grain to sprout, and allowing flowers whose faces turn to the sun to grow along its edges. Not for testament or immortality, but for gratitude, born of place and of kindred spirits. Testament and immortality will take care of themselves if the sluices are kept in good working condition. And the final one I've got is, I wrote it for my daughter, Jillian. She got married during COVID, so we couldn't be there. Married a lovely fellow from Ireland, and they are moving to Ireland. So, and Ireland's kind of closer here than Edmonton, where they are now anyway, so it's all good. It's called For Jillian on Her Wedding. Who could ever notice just one more ray of light on a sunny August day, with the wind bending stalks of grain as if to test their mettle for the impending harvest? But it was a ray of sunshine beaming through a prism that suffused my world with colors. illumining and awakening. I cried when you first cried. Knowing no better, I sang to you that sunny summer day as I carried you around, announcing to the world that hope and promise were once again made manifest. Now the circle has widened, and that same ray refracts and floods new spaces with hope and promise anew. The seeds have been sown, and the harvest will once again fill the granaries. And that's emerging. So thank you very much for your allowing me to read for you.
That was fabulous. Thank you, Jerry. My daughter actually was married during COVID too in 2020. She was supposed to get married in have a big church wedding but they just didn't want to wait. So they got married on our front lawn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you. Mine got married because the fellow is from Ireland, and he
Yeah.
would have to go back to Ireland to apply for permanent residency. So they rushed along what would have happened anyways, but
Right.
I'm sure there are a million COVID stories like yours and ours that
Yeah.
that would resonate with people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that too.
That's very sweet. Sarah Murphy, go ahead and read for us and introduce yourself too.
Okay. All right. So I'll just start by introducing myself by saying that my son was also married during COVID. And he was married out in Calgary. And I got in the window in September, October, between the emergence of Delta and then Omicron. So it was really kind of interesting. And for those of you who don't know me, but also I've forgotten who it was who's in St. Andrews, but I'm in Bocabec, right outside St. Andrews. So we will want to get together sometime. But my experience in Calgary, it was a wonderful wedding. It was catered into the other in-laws' yard because you couldn't do anything else. And yeah, I just got my full, let's put it this way. Last year, I recorded an audiobook. I recorded 2 audiobooks, both of my novels. And the only person I was in the same room with, I think that whole year, was the sound tech who was actually behind a glass. So I did Calgary, I came back, and I haven't done any people since. All right, having said that, off to who I am as a writer. I do some spoken word, but I'm mostly a writer of fiction, some creative nonfiction. And my spoken word is monologue rather than poetry. So it tends to be long-ish. So I seldom bring things in under 5 minutes. But what I've been doing is reading excerpts, both from the 2 novels that were published, the ones that I did the audiobooks of, the 2-volume novel from last year. But I'm now working on another manuscript, which began first draft before COVID, but it opens, as for those of you who were here last time, it opens in a time not long before SARS. And it basically does a whole fantastic thing on 2,000 years of history and plagues. So weird coincidences how the world works. This is just a small, strange piece from that novel. I'm just rereading what I hope to be the draft that I can send to my publisher. And I just thought it would be fun. Has nothing to do with themes. The problem with novels is that it's what's in it, right? There's nothing else you can do. Okay, so I'll just call this excerpt Achilles. Tired as MX was of being told a lady is measured by the delicate, tired as MX was of being told a lady is measured by the delicacy of her stitches, when the occasion arose that she would have to sew buttons or hems, usually, and even those never well, she would tell herself another story, one of those that surrounded the Trojan War, not part of the Iliad, which too she had come to love, its simplified emotions and brilliant battles, even the so very literally spilled guts, despite the fact that her teachers thought that she should love the Odyssey, which was more complex and she was a good student. But she liked this story more. And as for Achilles himself, young, always beardless, so definitely adolescent Achilles, even at the end, she alternated his being her hero, her Amazon's lover or worthy opponent. She studies Amazons, by the way, that's what she does. She's an archaeologist because every novel of conspiracies needs an archaeologist and a priest. Even at the end, she alternated his being her hero, her Amazon's lover or worthy opponent, with this other story in which she would indulge each time she pricked her finger with her sewing needle and sucked on her own blood. Because it was said that Thetis, nymph or sea goddess, mother to Achilles, knew that it was prophesied she would lose her son to war. And so it was said that she hid him in the women's quarters of some noble house, on the distaff side, they always put it, where women created thread and the fine weaving that came from it. Beautiful, life-giving things, though boring perhaps if adventure beckoned more than color or the texture of white on white. So that when the Trojan War came round, and it was obvious to all that without this potentially great, his entire reputation was prophecy after all, but early adolescent warrior, the Greek side would lose. Odysseus and Nestor and Ajax and God knows who else were sent to find him. And Odysseus, trickiest of them, did the part get in there that were sent to find him. And Odysseus, the trickiest of them, did, and quite easily, where his mother, Thetis, had hid him in the women's quarters. Because Odysseus entered with his companions thunderously into the women's quarters, smelling without doubt of a long ride with neither saddle nor stirrups or maybe even underwear, and threw down armor and weapons among the spinning distaffs, and did not have to wait long before Achilles, otherwise unrecognizable, so beardlessly beautiful he was, stifled there among the creatures of hearth and home, left forth to take them, fainting with them perhaps, destroying weaving and spinning and crockery in his demonstration of proficiency, or just running his hands along helmet and greaves and chest plate as if they were old friends, and was caught. And despite his mother's weeping, thought the old warrior's offer was one he couldn't refuse, and was whisked away to Troy, and to his tent, and to his sulk, and to his death. Much has been made of this story, of course it has. Even when she first read it, MX already knew that. That's the protagonist's name, of course. MX already knew that, though maybe not its specifics. The Freudian, the men's movement horror of making this potentially great warrior a mama's boy, confining him to no more than the weaving of cloth, though the story will not faze her anymore now as she exits the plane. This is the front scene as opposed to this is the thing she's thinking. And as she exits the plane, girding herself for another kind of battle than it did then. She knew already, even in what they were taught in this girls' boarding school, that a man is no more diminished by loving the traditional stuff of women than a woman by loving the traditional stuff of men. So she would tell her friends that this small incident was key to her legend. Without it, Achilles could not have accomplished what he did. Because he really did love the stuff of weaving, perhaps introduced brighter, more vibrant colors into the usual whites. You always see the Greeks in those white chitons, right? Into the usual whites, and found there in that house a girl who loved weaponry as much as he did color. So that she taught him all the intensely refined techniques, the dyes, the mordant to stop them, the materials that grabbed which color best, allowing him to refine them further, while he taught her the use of arms and armor, practiced with weapons made from wood, rode horses with her by moonlight, so that when the moment came, they were both prepared, and the Trojan War proceeded as it should. And Achilles remained beardless throughout its 9 years, not because he was God-born, but because he was a girl. a girl who could run like the wind, who would not stop to look at the colors, even the pale yellows and blues of the intestines lying twisted on the battlefield, and be slain on the spot. All right. And she gets to play Achilles in the school play, which a little bit on to this, which I got to do when I was in 7th grade. I got to be Achilles and sing in our school musical. Okay.
I'm still stuck on intestines there, Sarah. Oh,
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't know. Have you read the Iliad? The Iliad spends a lot of time on intestines on the battlefield. And
oh,
I have this other scene there's a beautiful mural at a site called Cacaxtla in Mexico, which spends its time with intestines on the battlefield. But yeah, I remember that. I loved the Iliad at 12, and it had a lot of intestines on the battlefield.
wow. Roger he was trying to find his
Trying
way
to get in?
back in, but I don't see him here.
No.
Well, we can move on to Jane Timms, and if Roger gets back, he can finish his reading.
Great. Well, I'm Jane Timms, and I write mystery. I write in the field of science fiction, and I also write poetry. And I have books published in all of those areas. But I'm a biologist and a botanist, and the theme of emergence, of course, immediately suggests plants. A couple of years ago, I had a project that I called Escapes, which looked at abandoned properties and what happened to the gardens after those properties were abandoned. And so from that has come quite a few poems. I started the idea when we drove through a place called Carroll Ridge. It's not far from Canterbury, and most of the community is gone, but there is a little bit of sign of it in that forget-me-nots from the former gardens have completely overtaken the woods. So it's one of many communities like that in New Brunswick. So this is the first poem. It's called Forget-Me-Not at Carroll Ridge. When you left, I said, I'll see you again. And I left too. You looked back at me over your shoulder, forlorn blue eyes. You crept into the woodland down the road, bloomed every spring. Forget-me-not persists, paints the woodland understory. Cerulean blue competes with lady slipper and bunchberry, blossoms every spring. One of the other places you can go to see abandoned flower gardens is up in Fredericksburg, which is just outside of Stanley. And there it's foxglove. They're just filling the ditches. And the Latin name of foxglove is digitalis. This is called digitalis in ditches. At first glance, hallucination, foxglove crowds the ditches. One-sided cluster of foxglove, handwear for fairies. Red, pink, and white, some tinged yellow or spotted within. Blue halo around glints of sunlight from windows, broken and burned. Not her intention to have her garden spill to the ditches. Bachelor's buttons, baby's breath, and thimbles for fingers. Lure for the unaware, witch's glove, dead man's bells. A trailing hand dares digoxin, glycoside. Old garden invades, weeds, really. And I'll read you one that really wasn't written for this, but it seems that when we're thinking about the Ukraine and so on, that army thoughts come to mind. So in a way, plants can be thought of as doing maneuvers. This is called maneuvers. 1, strategy. Before the windstorm, they make a plan to overtake the garden, to use to advantage gust and rain. The seasoned oak, gnarled and weazened, conducts war games, excels in situational awareness, explores alternative tactics, barks out orders, uses the pavement as war table, winged seeds as markers, branches to push leaves around. 2, tactics. The force matches technique to terrain, the cellar, the yard, the field, and trenches. Oak orders lupin to volley seeds, fill the ditches, orders dogbane to invade, bellflower to use rhizomes, creep along the ground, goat's beard parachutists to land beyond the wire, mallow in pink translucent dress to infiltrate, orders foxglove and monk's hood, lady of the valley to poison, rose and hawthorn to impale. Oak orders up mercenaries, knotweed to dominate the margins, to advance under cover of grapevine, assisted by wildflowers, drape of clematis, tangle of bindweed. And that's it. Lots of flower poems. Pat says, have you ever known a weed that wasn't a warrior? No, they have good tactics.
I'm right near an overgrowth of, what is that great huge one? The name suddenly went on me. Hogweed, giant hogweed. You want a real battle axe there.
Yeah, that whole family is a kind of miserable family to write about, because first you got to figure out what you're doing, which species you're writing about, and then you got to decide whether it's poisonous. Is it Queen Anne's lace, which is fine, it's close
It's
to carrot,
gorgeous.
right? And then there's the giant hogweed, which can burn you on touch. So
Yeah,
I
and
love
it's
plants.
beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. And the giant hogweed is beautiful. So if you don't know that, it has tempted many people to touch it. Yeah.
And it's very tall. It's way above most people's heads.
15, it's 15 feet sometimes tall. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're getting rid of it slowly. There's less of it each year. They've decided to take it seriously and, like just get it. But right next to the road,
Yeah.
I'm hearing some background noise. If it's coming from someone, if you could mute yourself so that doesn't make it onto our radio piece, that would be great. I don't think there's anyone else to read unless someone wants to that hasn't so far. Pat, you don't have anything to read, do you? I know you're here as an audience member.
I have reams, honey. I have volumes.
Well, if you'd like to read, we have lots of time.
Stuff. I'll scare the cat here. Wait, I only have 10 cats tonight, so I have to be careful. I was waiting for Roger to come back. I would really like
He
to-
sent me a note and said that he
No,
can't.
Can't do it.
He lost power and then it returned and then he lost it again. So
That's no fun.
yeah.
Well, we should all just go and watch the hockey game or something. No, it's not even that night, is it? Is there a hockey game tonight?
There's nothing
I
on TV
hate
on
hockey.
Saturday.
I absolutely hate hockey, but I divorced a man over a hockey game, but I did. Tell you what, I'm rewriting my memoir, Jane. You've read them so many times. And was thinking of the very page that I had in front of me tonight could sort of be an emergence. It's a little section from a chapter from When I Found My Mother. Maybe I'll just read it to you, if you don't mind, just ever so. It takes about 3.5 minutes, just in case. And we may have a share your screen at the end if you don't mind, Rhonda, just ever so quickly. Are you my mother? Joan Lawrence, Patty Smith. Thank you for letting us share in your reunion, said Peter Zosky, smiling and picking at his beard. I understand you just met for the first time a few hours ago, he began. Yes, thanks to you. We just met at the airport, I blurted. She spied me first because I was looking for someone a lot older. Yes, you certainly could pass for sisters, he said. I just found out that I have 2 half-sisters, I blurted again. I sound like a 5-year-old. Shut up, shut up. Really? How interesting. I'd like to hear your story from the beginning, Joan. I'm assuming it all started with you. I mean, in the chicken and egg sense. Yes, that's right, said my mother calmly. I found myself pregnant at 15. My parents were not willing or not able, for that matter, to support me. They were still younger kids at home to look after, so I was sent to the Salvation Army home, where I stayed until Patty was born. This must have been very difficult, said Peter, looking into her big brown eyes. It certainly was. I really wanted to keep her, but I only had a grade 9 education, and they didn't have the social system for unwed mothers that they have now. There were only 2 choices in the 1950s, really. Bring shame to your family by going home with a child born out of wedlock, or put her up for adoption. In my situation, I really only had one choice. From what I've heard so far, it seems it worked out all right for Patty. Would you agree, Patty? Oh yes, I was adopted by a lovely family who spoiled me to death, I croaked. Things worked out for you too, did they, Joan? Well, yes, I left and went to Toronto, went to night school and got married and had 2 little girls. They're both married now with children. I'm looking forward to meeting Patty's sons soon. Well, it sounds like this is a very successful reunion. Before we leave you 2 to the rest of your lives together, can you tell me how you found each other? Asked Peter. Patty found me. I just dialed the number that my sister left with a friend of mine. Patty should be the one to tell you. It wasn't easy because adoption records are closed in New Brunswick to protect the identity of the birth parents that were promised anonymity when they put their children up for adoption. Really, said Joan? I don't remember ever being told that or ever being given a choice. Wow, they are sealed shut. They will give you non-identifying information if you request it, which I did after my sons were born. When they told me that my mother was a small and dark and artistically inclined, she sounded like somebody I'd like to meet. So with advice from parent finders and a few leads from my husband, who is a very good detective, we tracked her down. Your husband is a detective, said Peter Zosky. Well, he's not really a detective. He once worked for Pinkerton's in Toronto, though. Let's just say it was a combination of his ingenuity and my persistence that finally led us to her. Patty, do your adopted parents know you've located your birth mother? He asked. Well, my adopted father died several years ago, but he found several half-siblings himself, which was a very positive experience for him, so I'm sure he would approve. My adopted mother has been very helpful, and she can't wait to meet Joan and thank her for giving her a daughter. What about you, Joan? Did you ever wonder what became of Patty? Oh yes, all the time, especially on her birthday. Of course, I was thinking of a little girl I had named Rosalie, but I would try to imagine what she looked like and what she was up to. Well, I guess you'll know from now on. Best of luck to you both, and thank you very much for coming on our show and sharing your story. Well, it wasn't Truth or Consequences or Ed Sullivan, and I didn't get to see the Beatles, but my heart was beating as fast as if I'd been sitting in the chair next to Paul McCartney. By the time we walked down the street to the hotel, where Peter met us for a nightcap, we were already celebrities. We no sooner slid into a booth in the corner of the Lord Nelson bar when the bartender came over with a bottle of wine. For you, he said, on the house. I blubbered through the whole interview. My sister came from the same orphanage. My parents were told they couldn't have children, so they adopted her, and 9 months later, they had me. I hear that happens a lot, said Joan, laughing. I watched as she picked up the glass and swirled it under her nose, my nose, before taking a sip and nodding her approval. I knew nothing about wine and wasn't sure how to hold the fancy glass, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from enjoying every minute of the few minutes we have had together. A toast, said Joan, to us, to us. And if you hit share your screen, I will show you the very night. Maybe. I might have to do something fancy too, right? host disabled participant screen sharing. That's okay. Oh, and there's a cat on there anyway. Ta-da! So you can't see my screen?
I
because-
can make you a co-host if you would like to
Oh, well,
share
that's okay. We won't
your screen.
go through that. Sure, I could share mine, but if it's a,
Okay, well, just hang on a second.
Okay.
Uh,
this boy's name is Romeo, if anybody's looking for a kitten. He's very lovely, and he and I foster kittens because I can give them away like the orphanage can.
well, now I don't think I've enabled that for this Zoom. I'm very sorry,
That's okay. That's quite all right.
Pat. Okay.
That's the little pit. It's just happened to be the section I was working on, and there it was, and its emergence into my new life in 1977.
Wow.
When-
So, would anyone else like to share? It's 7:30. We still have a few minutes. Robbie Gunter, no? Do you have anything? No. Jerry, I'd be interested in hearing your op-ed piece. No?
Yeah, I could do that. I would be, in fact, quite eager and honored to share it. It's not terribly long, so if you could just hang tough for a sec here, I'll have it up.
Your voice is low, though.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
There we go. That's
that might
better.
help a little, might. It's called Ukraine and the World at a Crossroads here. Just give me a sec. There it is. On February 24th, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the world very starkly discovered two things: who and what Russia and Vladimir Putin really are, and who and what Ukraine and its people really are. Many wonder what Putin's motivation is for this unprovoked invasion, but he follows in the footsteps of imperialist Russians throughout the centuries who have co-opted Ukrainian history, culture, and language from as far back as the Kievan Rus period in the 10th century and remanufactured it as a Russian identity, with Ukrainians considered to be nothing more than little Russians. This stolen history is the basis of Putin's justification for claiming that Ukraine has no fundamental right to exist as an independent sovereign state. For him, this invasion is about putting Ukraine in its place, and that place is under a falsified historical Russian thumb. Putin wants to reconstitute some version of the Soviet Union in which Ukraine was nominally a constituent republic, but in which Russian was the lingua franca, or of the Russian Empire before that, in which Ukraine was merely a collection of Russian provinces. There have been several stops and starts in the path to actual Ukrainian statehood, with the most recent in 1991, when Ukraine chose to follow its own mostly democratic path by voting for independence in the wake of the disintegration of the Soviet Union. Russia tolerated this as long as Ukrainian elected leaders who did not tangibly stray out of the Russian orbit. But this changed, first in 2004 with the Orange Revolution, and later with the Maidan protests in 2013-14, in which Ukrainians made it clear that they saw their future in Europe rather than with Russia. Needless to say, this did not sit well with Russia and the autocratic Putin, who finally decided this year that it needed to force Ukraine back into the Russian orbit one way or another. We are now seeing the results of that. Russia is selling its claim to the Russian people by claiming that Ukraine is somehow run by Nazis, despite various recent leaders having some Jewish heritage, including the current president, and that this special military operation, rife with the killing of civilians and the bombing of peaceful ancient cities, is somehow a defense of the fatherland. Does that sound familiar? This is nonsense, as Ukraine has not been an aggressor in any way. Now, the Ukrainians have only one thing in mind: a fierce defense of their homeland. President Volodymyr Zelensky's response to a US offer of out-of-country refuge will go down in history as the new standard of bravery against which leaders will be measured. He said, "I need ammunition, not a ride." Winston Churchill himself would have nodded approvingly. This heroic David versus Goliath story resonates on many levels throughout the world, including among New Brunswickers of every stripe. It is difficult to put into words the extent to which Ukrainians, both in Ukraine and here in New Brunswick, which has a pretty sizable, thriving Ukrainian community, appreciate the support that emanates from every corner of this province. French and English, city and country, north and south. Ukrainians see it, feel it, and are very, very grateful for it. I talk to relatives there regularly, so I know this. New Brunswick nascent Ukrainian organizations have been literally working around the clock to accomplish two tasks. One is to help the world understand what exactly is happening in Ukraine, and the other is to provide humanitarian aid both to soldiers in Ukraine and to the unprecedented mass of refugees who are primarily women, children, and the elderly who are fleeing Russia's barbaric onslaught. Volunteers are still working out the details of this Herculean venture, but at this point, there are a couple of NB sites with more information. One is the Ukrainian Club of Moncton's page, and the other is their Facebook page. Anyways, there are many other national and international organizations offering to help as well, all of which shows the extent of the support that the rough, proud, and storied people of Ukraine are receiving in the face of naked Russian aggression. This support, moral or otherwise, is deeply appreciated, and it does help them a great deal. For perhaps the first time in history, Ukrainians know that they are not fighting this existential battle alone. And I really appreciate your letting me share that. If I could add one more thing, and I say this respectfully because we hear it all the time, but here's a learning opportunity. It's just Ukraine. It's not the Ukraine. The Ukraine was really more of the Russian version, where Russia would call it, well, it's just the provinces, it's the territories, it's the borderland, it's it's something lesser than what we are. Ukraine is its own state. There's no more it's just Ukraine. And again, I offer that respectfully because you hear it in many, many quarters. But if nothing else, I think there's probably three good things that have come out of all of this. Number one is the world knows who Putin is. Number two, the world now knows really well who Ukraine is. Number three, I haven't heard the word COVID mentioned in the last 10 days. So, there's some positives coming out of all that. But again, thank you for letting me share and for the suggestion, Rhonda. I really appreciate that.
It's really nicely written. Thank you so much for clarifying and giving me a couple of Facebook pages. I didn't realize there was a Moncton Ukrainian group as well. It's great. But COVID is still out there. I know 2 or 3 little fellas that are home quarantined with it with their families. It's around town. It's still here. And, we don't get the numbers at night, but it's here.
Hopefully not
I
for
hear you.
forever. Not forever.
No, nothing lasts forever, I suppose, except
No.
death and taxes. But
Death and taxes. Thank you very much, Jerry. I really do appreciate your perspective. And I'll be sure to say Ukraine from now on, not the Ukraine. It's so funny, you don't even know what the distinction is if you don't have any history with it. So thank you very much.
Yeah. It's a very political. It's a very political choice. The other one is, of course, the capital city, which has for years been known as Kiev,
that's
K-I-E-V.
a tough time with it.
Well, that is Russian.
Yeah.
That is the Russian version. And
I
in the
get it
Soviet
now.
period and prior to that, of course, the Russians were the ones who wrote the rules. It's Kiev and it's Lvov and it's Chernigov and all these other Russian words. Well, hell with them. It's Kyiv, it's K-Y-I-V, and most newspapers now are starting to report it that way, thankfully. So again, that's the other good thing that's come from all this is we've all had an opportunity to learn something about a country that many of us didn't know. A lot of people thought Russians, Ukrainians, same people. Now they're finding out, no, they're not. And so they're, it's hard to find the positives in all this because people are dying and losing their homes, but there are some. I've been asked to do a presentation at a school because I posted a video on Facebook that I had properly produced and everything. And it's at a school at Bay St. Anne. Ever since we moved to New Brunswick, we'd been working on our French. Well, this Bay St. Anne is a French school, so I guess I'm going to be doing a presentation on Ukraine in French. And if I'm not a real New Brunswicker now, then I never will be, honest to heaven. So
That sounds wonderful and really interesting too. I'd love to be able to hear that. Well, that concludes our March open mic night. And stay tuned for the first Saturday in April when I will really try hard to give you the right the right Zoom link. And who knows what we'll have in the summertime. If things open up, we may be able to start doing these live. We were thinking of maybe traveling with them around the province. So we'll see where that goes.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Although I would
Wonderful.
travel myself to go see it elsewhere too, so no
Mm.
question.
Yeah.
We'll see how
Well,
it goes.
Those of us in places like me, we travel all the time to go to things. I miss that, I'm telling you.
Well, once again, thank you. I didn't introduce myself either. I'm Rhonda Bullimer. I'm the president of the WFNB, and I'm signing off. Thank you very much for coming.
And we appreciate everything you do too.
Bye.
So
Oh,
thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah. This has been wonderful, and
You're
thank
welcome.
you. Despite
Thanks,
the,
Rhonda.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good evening,
You guys
everybody.
again.
Yeah.
thank you.
Stay
night.
safe.
You too.